Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a source video that puts forward a really provocative idea that a nation's history books, and even its cartoons, can be deliberately shaped to build a powerful identity and project influence all over the world.
So right out of the gate, the source video hits us with this pretty startling claim. This quote is used to frame the entire argument, suggesting a level of political power that's almost hard to wrap your head around. It really sets the stage for the theory that's about to unfold.
The whole argument really hinges on this idea the source calls lobby diplomacy. Now, this isn't presented as your typical backroom political deals. The video describes it as a much deeper, more complex strategy for weaving a country's interests into the very culture of another nation.
So how does this strategy actually work? Well, according to the source, it's not just one thing. It's this four-pronged approach hitting what it sees as the core pillars of a society. It starts with kids and works its way all the way up to the news you watch every day, creating this whole ecosystem of influence.
Okay, so let's dig into that first pillar, because this is where the source claims it all begins. We're talking about the stories told to the youngest generation, how history curricula and even cartoons are allegedly used to build a specific worldview from the ground up. The source claims this starts incredibly early, with cartoons that kids all over the world watch. The argument is that these shows create what it calls a soft corner, a kind of built-in sympathy for Jewish history and the Israeli narrative long before anyone's thinking about politics.
From cartoons, the alleged influence then jumps straight into the classroom. The source video points to this organization, the Institute for Curriculum Services, and claims it works directly with textbook publishers to actually rewrite the history that's being taught in American schools. And here's a concrete example the video gives to make its point. It's not just a small tweak in wording. The claim is that the entire narrative is shifted, from a story of displacement to one of reunion. It completely changes how a student would understand that moment in history.
And this idea is then traced all the way up to the university level. The source presents this statistic that 20% of professors are Jewish and argues that this demographic reality creates a kind of built-in framework that helps keep academic conversations friendly to a pro-Israel viewpoint.
All right, so if these ideas are planted early on in schools, how do they get broadcast to the entire world? The source points to two massive engines for this: Hollywood and, of course, the mainstream news media. The video gives a bunch of examples of big Hollywood movies, and the claim is that they all kind of push the same themes. They allegedly generate a lot of sympathy for the Israeli cause, while also, showcasing Israel's military strength and determination.
And to back this up, the source presents this chart about who's actually making these movies. The argument being made is pretty straightforward. If a majority of the top writers and directors share a particular background, that's going to influence the kinds of stories that get told. Then the focus shifts from Hollywood movies to the daily news. The source alleges that the biggest names in media, from newspapers like the New York Times to TV networks like CNN, are all guided by pro-Israel interests right up to the executive level.
Okay, so this is where everything really comes together. The source has spent all this time building up this framework of alleged Israeli influence. But it's not really just about Israel. It's using that whole story as a mirror to make a critical point about the situation in India. To understand the comparison, we have to look at how the source defines the Zionist movement. It's presented as this powerful ideological glue, a movement that created this deep sense of unity where loyalty to the nation and its people came before anything else. And that unified vision is put in direct contrast to what the source claims is happening with Indian education. The argument is that instead of building pride, the system actually does the opposite, that it teaches kids to admire foreign invaders and creates a national inferiority complex. And here's the specific evidence the source uses to make that point. It's about what gets focused on in history class. The claim is that there's this huge imbalance where the curriculum spends ages on foreign rulers, while these incredibly powerful native Indian empires are barely even mentioned.
So what's the result of this, according to the source? Well, it claims this educational foundation leads to a whole society where key institutions are actually working against a strong national identity. Universities, media, even movies are all painted as part of the problem.
So, after all this critique, where does the video leave us? It doesn't just point out problems, it actually offers a solution, a path forward, based on the very model it just spent all this time describing.
And here's the final prescription, really. The video basically says, look at this model of ideological unity. India needs something similar. It calls for a new nationalist movement to unite all Indians, putting loyalty to the country ahead of religious identity.
And that leaves us with a really big and honestly a pretty tough question to chew on. When a nation starts to consciously shape its own story, especially for its children, where do you draw the line between fostering healthy national pride and creating what could be seen as propaganda?